Hi, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Good afternoon. My name is Faustine Chan. I'm the Business Innovation Manager for BBB. So we've been holding daily webinars for our businesses and our business community just to give them resources and information just to help navigate their business at the time. So thank you everyone for joining. This webinar is being recorded. So if you are a call-in, listen-in only participant, meaning if you just call in on your telephone, you want to review this on your computer later, you can find it at events.bbbcommunity.org. Also, if you are an attendee listening in on a computer and watching it, you can review these on that website as well. All of our webinars are recorded, so you can review past webinars on there as well, and then also sign up for upcoming webinars this week as well. If you do have questions, please go ahead and type them in the chat option. We will answer those at the end or in the Q&A option, either or one of those works. So I want to go ahead and get started. We have a great speaker here today from Desert Financial Credit Union, which is located in Arizona. So we have Jeff Wentzel. He is the Senior Financial Lender at Desert Financial Credit Union. He previously obtained his BA in economics from the University of Minnesota before getting his master's degree in business administration from the W.P. Carey School of Business, which is in Arizona. So go Sun Devils. He previously also worked for Wells Fargo, Arizona Business Bank, and Great Western Bank. He's also has been a very active volunteer for the Centers of Habilitation for over 23 years. So I'll go ahead and hand it over to you, Jeff.
Well, thank you, Faustine. Good morning, everybody. I hope the start of this communication in our program today finds everyone healthy and in good spirits, and that everyone stays that way. These are truly unprecedented times, and I've never seen anything like it, nor I'm sure have any of you. The COVID-19 crisis is something that we had never really thought that we would deal with on the banking side anyway, at least this individual hadn't. I've been a banker since 1981, commercially managing various divisions and commercial lending of all sorts, private banking as well. I wanted to talk to you today because I'm sure many of you are under a great deal of stress relative to business continuation, downturns that you're seeing. Perhaps you're even closed temporarily, and maybe wondering how you're going to manage your obligations to all of your stakeholders. So I wanted to just spend a moment. I'll go through the agenda quickly. Everybody's top of mind today in business is the PPP program put out by the government, the SBA, the Payroll Protection Program. I thought I would spend the first few minutes giving general comments and updates that I have today, a very short program review, and then address some business owner concerns that I have heard and that have been communicated to me. After we go through that little review, and please, write down your questions relative to the program, to anything I cover today, and we'll spend as much time as it takes at the end of the presentation to address those questions. In these times, other things that become very important today are communicating with your lenders. I call them stakeholders. So it's your lenders, your landlord, clients and vendors, and making sure that they're aware of your situation, and if you're requesting any special sort of assistance or relief given the time that we find ourselves in today. So we'll follow that up. I also included in the presentation a number of information sources that you can go to. There are a myriad available, as I'm sure you're aware, but these are some of the ones that are particular to helpful relative to the PPP program and other relief programs that the SBA is offering today. So without further ado, we can move on, Faustine, to the next slide, please. The Paycheck Protection Program, general comments and updates. If you've tried to apply for this loan, you may have found that it's been very difficult to get questions answered, perhaps even submit your application. Lenders are making progress on a daily basis. We're getting closer, but I can tell you that latest information is that funding on these loan requests will likely not take place for a few days yet. Some are getting through, but you can imagine the deluge of applications and interests that have been put forward across the country. I know at Desert Financial, we have not typically done originated SBA loans. We are an approved lender. So we're getting a program in place that isn't quite ready yet to accept applications and put them forward. A number of institutions are in that same situation. The best place for you to check is to go to your own bank, credit union, or financial institution's website and see if their application software is live at this time. If not, you are best served probably to get the information off of some of the websites that I have provided later in the presentation and get your documentation ready to go. As you'll remember, the program was initially allocated $349 billion. That sounds like an awful lot of money. However, just since Friday when the program opened, for instance, Bank of America has reported that they've received 32.6 billion in applications, I believe. And Wells Fargo has actually stopped, they announced, taking applications at this time. They've already taken 10 billion, which is what their limit is at this time, from what I understand. So anyway, go to your bank's website, keep checking. Most have COVID-19 box to check, and you'll get the latest information. Relative to that, most institutions, because of the volume that we're expecting and experiencing, are handling their own clients or members first. They simply don't have the capacity to deal with non-clients, and they feel they have an obligation to serve their own existing clients and members. Most banks have said that those clients, you would have had to have been a client for about a month. I think I've seen February 15th and other dates. So you had to be a pre-existing client or member. At this time, Desert Financial is taking all names, interested parties, and we're hoping to help as many people as we can besides our own members. There's another opportunity for you if you don't have a bank contact to apply with. A number of companies have signed on for this program as agents. What these agents do, these companies have done, is solicit a number of participating banks, and what they will do is collect applications and put them in a queue for these participating lenders to take applicants and applications and process them as they come across those queues. Now, this can be very beneficial for people in that the agent will verify your information as you make application to ensure that it's correctly filled out and that you have the proper documentation. I've also heard then that they follow up and advise you that when a bank has taken the application and processed it through the SBA. Finally, another thing that's very important and valuable to business owners, if you're interested in forgiveness on this loan, these agents are getting back to clients, the people that have used them when the 8-week period is about to expire, to ensure that they put together the proper information and have calculated correctly the amount that should be forgiven on their PPP loan. So you would find those people online. I went on earlier this morning and need to advise too that There are some that are charging some sort of servicing fee that I saw up to $1,500. That is not a company you want to do business with, because there are supposed to be no outside fees associated with this program. Agents are getting a very small portion of the lender fee that's paid for each application, each loan, to the lender that processes the application. So there should be no cost to you for using an agent. PPP versus EIDL, don't be confused. There are a couple of different programs available today. The Economic Injury Disaster Loan is available to apply for directly at SBA.gov. The only qualification, you can apply for both loans, but the purpose of the loans cannot be the same. EIDL needs to be used for something other than salaries and utilities, the qualifiers for the PPP program. It is possible that the grant portion of the EIDL loan, you may have heard, can be up to $10,000 a grant that's forgiven immediately. That can be rolled into the PPP loan, actually. Other updates on funding. People are interested about when they're going to get their money under this PPP loan. Latest information is that most people are not expected to see money in their accounts until sometime later in the week. The SBA, the funding mechanism, I heard, is not in place yet, or in place across the board, across the country at all lending institutions. So best advice at this point is to compile your information. If you don't have a place to actually submit it yet, be ready. There are sample applications out there with listing of loan or information that you'll need. Just be ready to go. Next slide, Faustine. Short program review. Eligibility and information required. It's really supposed to be a very simple program this year, or at this time. It's meant to be emergency relief, and that's exactly what it is. The borrower will have to supply a calculation that's equal to 2.5 times their average monthly payroll, and that would be the maximum loan amount that they can apply for. Other than that, they will just provide some information that shows that that they do have that payroll information available, used in the calculation. And they are required to certify on the application that they have been damaged by COVID, that their business continuation may require these loan proceeds, this relief, things of that nature. So it's really a very simple process. That's the way it's designed to be, in order to get this money into business owners' hands as soon as possible, so they can continue paying their people and their obligations. The calculation, there are calculation formulas out there that are easy to follow, but I've included here just what sorts of payroll costs are you're able to include in the calculation, some that you might not think of. And when you arrive at that amount, you just multiply it by 2.5, and you can apply for a PPP loan in that amount. Okay, forgiveness. Really important feature of this loan is that a large portion or all of it can be forgiven if you utilize the proceeds for the purposes intended. Again, that's to continue payroll, pay rent, interest on mortgage debt, utilities, things of that nature. The calculation is to be sent in at the 8-week mark from the time that your loan was funded. You will be able to submit a calculation and documentation that shows up to 25% of the proceeds were used for non-payroll purposes. you can apply that to the forgiveness. 75% of whatever is forgiven must be in the form of payroll having been paid to employees. Again, the formula to complete that is available online. And if you use an agent, they will also help you. Your banks and financial institutions, credit unions will help you also. That's really very short review of the program. It's a 2-year loan, 1%. Anything that isn't forgiven can go as long as 2 years. You don't have to make a payment for the first 6 months at all. Interest will accrue, but anything that isn't forgiven after 8 weeks will be due in 2 years. You can prepay this loan, so that anytime without penalty. That's pretty much a short program review. Again, I will make sure that the BBB gets the latest interim final ruling from the SBA that provides much of this information. If you're interested, I'm sure that Faustine and the BBB can get that to you after the program. Next slide, Faustine, please. A number of owners have concerns about taking assistance from the government. Will they step into your information? Is that going to be problematic for you in the future? From what I'm hearing, you're not providing any specific financial information. The underwriting for this program doesn't revolve around any sort of operating performance history, current or past. So you won't be submitting financial statements to the best of my knowledge. In this case, it appears that the SBA and the government is really clearly trying to provide relief immediately for clients that need it, for business owners that need it, and to keep people employed, to have paychecks coming so that when this thing turns and we're able to go back to work, you business owners will still have your valued employees, so they wouldn't have gone somewhere else. So as far as being concerned about the government having or holding things at your that you wouldn't want them to have, I guess that's something that shouldn't be a concern at this point. Owners have been concerned about first come, first serve. There was $349 billion allocated, as I mentioned earlier, and it's supposed to be allocated on a first come, first serve basis based on applications being received and approved by the SBA. The money is being used quickly, at least as far as we've heard, as you might imagine. But I've had clients worried that the money would be gone by tomorrow. That's not going to happen. The program is designed to run through June 30th, and you may have heard on various news sites that the government has indicated that an additional allocation will follow directly behind this first allocation if it runs out soon or before expiration of the program. So for what that is worth, I don't know that I would be overly concerned about not being able to take advantage of this program because the money has been spent or allocated out to borrowers. Loan forgiveness, I did mention that the bulk of a portion to all of the loan that you receive may be forgiven. That 8-week mark is really the critical point for you to remember and to be compiling the information so that you can submit for forgiveness of that loan. One good suggestion that I've heard, I believe it came from a congressman's webinar, was that it might be a good idea for applicants to open a specifically dedicated DDA account, checking account for these loan proceeds. In a lot of instances, as I mentioned earlier, you will have needed to be a customer of the bank or credit union that you're obtaining the loan from, but you can open a new account to track specifically the proceeds from this loan. It will make it much easier for you to re-verify the information when you're applying for forgiveness. And it will also take away some of those fears you might have about the government being involved in your business. They won't see any of your other remittances or account information if you have this dedicated account. So again, 75% of the amount forgiven must be for salary-related purposes, no more than 25% for the other purposes, approved purposes of the loan. Loan repayment, we discussed briefly. I'm sorry to repeat myself, but this is a 2-year loan. First 6 months of payments are forgiven. Interest accrues during that period at 1%. You can repay this loan at any time. So if you don't use the proceeds, I can't imagine, but if you don't use the proceeds, you can repay that whenever you feel that it's time to do so within that 2-year period. There are no personal guarantees for this loan, which is new and unusual for SBA financing, enhanced financing. So there are no possibility of the government coming back at you personally. You're not pledging any personal assets in repayment of this loan. So typically in 7A loans, you know, a number of the SBA loans, they'll always take personal guarantees of anybody 20% or more in ownership, and oftentimes take a second mortgage, second deed of trust on owners' homes in addition. That won't be an issue this time with this program. However, in the event that you have made false claims and relative to your payroll amounts, anything really, the government will come back at you, has the ability to come back at you for criminal prosecution. That really does it about basic owner concerns that I have heard. If you have any more, I'm sure we can cover those in the question and answer session. We can move on. These are very difficult times. I imagine I've already had a number of clients that doors are closed for now by either order or owner decision to do so because of lack of traffic. And this is without question going to create issues as to any outstanding obligations you have with stakeholders. So I wanted to put together something that would provide you with some guidance as to, number one, how to work with your lenders. As I mentioned, I've been in this profession for years and years, and it is very important that you communicate with your lender. You are much more likely to obtain relief and cooperation that you need in this time if you're doing so. Silence is not the way to go here. They won't forget about you, and it doesn't really speak to your understanding and feeling about the current situation. First thing to do for you if you're considering or having difficulty, considering you will have difficulty repaying loans pursuant to the terms and conditions of the loans that you sign, the documents, check your lender websites first for information and announcements of possible assistance available. A number of them have that kind of information on their sites today. Again, because this is a national disaster, really. It's not, COVID has impacted everybody, and it's not no business owner is at fault. Act of God, whatever you'll call it. So lenders are in a frame of mind to help to the greatest extent possible, at least in my experience as a commercial banker through the years. So check your lender websites for information. You'll also want to review your loan documents, know your loan structures and the requirements that are a part of those loans relative to repayment and reporting. You know, I think it's also important to look at what possibilities are in the event of default on your loans, just so that you know as you put together a plan to put forward to your lender. In addition to reviewing your loan documents, it's very important that you compile and have ready up-to-date financial details, your historical information. Your bank or lending institution, credit union may have historical information already. If you're a borrower, that's likely. Perhaps not. But if I were to make a recommendation, it would be to have the last 3 years. That's a pretty common requirement. Financial information at the ready, both personal financial information if you personally guarantee your debt, and company information. It would also be important that you, if you haven't and you do guarantee these loans, that you update your personal financial statement to a current date. Personal financial statement, of course, is your listing of personal assets and liabilities and schedules of debt and assets. Another big part of your plan will be operating impacts. You'll want to be ready to discuss just what you've experienced thus far due to the current environment with this crisis in place. My clients have been back to me, my members have been back to me with what they're experiencing by way of lost revenues. On a weekly basis, some have given me that information, talking about profitability, employees. A number of people are afraid, and those that are still open, what are you doing for your people to keep them safe? Are you having trouble keeping staff available due to their concerns about operating in the public? So those sorts of impacts you want to be ready to discuss so that you can support your request for relief. Then you want to put your plan together, decide what kind of relief you need at this point, and get ready to have a conversation with your banker. The plan should include, you know, where you are, what your current situation is, what you're experiencing thus far, what your expectation might be into the future based on how long, you know, potential of how long this shutdown essentially might last, and have an idea of what it is you'd like by way of relief, be it we'll talk about those options after we finish this little this part of the agenda. Can we move on, Faustine, please? Once you've prepared that information, it's time to make the case to your lender. And I would start that by a telephone call to your banker, telling him or her that you have been damaged by the COVID crisis and that you need to visit with them about potential options for relief in anticipation of continuing difficulties on the operating side. A quick phone call then sets up an opportunity for you to provide your plan and relief request in writing. And I think that's very important. It can just be an email. It doesn't have to be a formal letter. But again, it's almost as if you're applying for a new loan altogether. You're just really applying to have existing loan terms changed or payments waived, things of that nature. But you need the information that you would normally have to apply for a new loan. Again, putting that in writing, detailing the issue, the current circumstances, what you expect to occur, and then finally, what you would like the lender to do for you. I would expect that they would acknowledge receipt of that request in writing, and that you would follow up if you haven't heard, again by phone, for confirmation, questions, answers. They may require some additional information, but at that point, I think that you would be in a position to request their offer of assistance in writing. At that point, then, once you've agreed on relief, I think it's going to be a very important piece of this that you keep your lender informed with a brief monthly update. It might even be as much as weekly. You know, we don't know how long this is going to last, and I think there's potential that my clients, my members, may in fact need additional relief and assistance down the road. So as we go through these hard times, if you're keeping your lender informed, and another request or an additional request for relief is warranted and needed, you'll be able to simply say, you've got the up-to-date information, and here's what I need now. So not only advising early, but advising often of what's going on. And for a lender, I said email. As you can imagine, there will be a lot of these types of communications going on. And a lender, to make sure that you stay in the queue of members and clients that are in the loop with your bank, the email is the way to do that. A telephone call can get lost, not returned, or even returned and then just kind of dropped. You need some sort of written record of what's going on. We can move on, Faustine. Critical communication are assistance options that you'll find from lenders that are typical. You'll think about a loan modification, whether or not that's required. Formal modification actually changes things like the maturity, interest rate, payment amounts. If there's any sorts of additional collateral taken, things of that nature, it's a pretty can be pretty involved process. Again, part of similar to applying for a new loan. So that's something you want to consider that might help you. What most of my member clients are doing today are requesting deferrals or forbearances, meaning that Desert Financial is providing forbearances, deferrals of payments for 90 days, starting predominantly April and May, for clients that are having difficulty or purporting that they will have difficulty meeting their obligations due to the negative impact of COVID. We're just doing that. We're approving those for our existing clients, predominantly based on those comments and the request, and their assessment of what the impacts have been relative to revenues, profitability, et cetera. If financial information isn't current, sometimes we are asking for that current financial information. But deferral and forbearance seems to be the most common assistance available today. A refinance of the entire debt can be costly for you as a business owner, because oftentimes if you have real estate pledged to this, there are appraisals that need to be redone, costs that you don't need to incur at this point, which make that relief less helpful to you. In the worst case, if you have or you think your business is not going to survive this crisis, it may not be out of the realm for you to be discussing some sort of settlement option with your bank. Perhaps taking some sort of discount on the loan amount to pay and have it be satisfied by your institution. That's really kind of a last-ditch effort, an option of last resort if you're not going to, if you're going to close up shop, or if you need to close up shop and discontinue your business operations. Settlement is not a preferred alternative, and I hope none of you get to that point. Next slide. Many of you are renting your business space and may also be looking at having potential difficulty in paying your rent. I'd suggest that you review your lease right away and do much the same that you were doing with your lending institution, in that you contact your landlord and advise them of the situation and what your plan is. Never ever send a check that you know will not be honored to a landlord, a bank, or any other creditor. It is an ill-conceived idea and not received well by the institution that you're wanting to pay. Yeah, never do that. Better not to pay at all and until you talk to the landlord or your creditor. You'll want to try to negotiate a partial or delayed rent payment. That's been happening quite regularly with my investor real estate clients, members. Their tenants are unable to make their rent at this time. And have contacted my landlord clients and indicated such, which in turn then those borrowers have received deferrals to allow for that to occur and not damage them personally on their loans. Some ideas, you may offer lease extension for some temporary relief. I've seen that already occurring. You know, landlords also know that their tenants are in the same situation that they are relative to their operating entities being severely damaged by COVID and the essential shutdown of our economy. So, and they know that it's not something that, again, is due to a poor operating performance at all. It's an external sort of factor that has caused your difficulties. Offering extensions for relief has been granted in some instances that I've seen. One other thing that you may check in your lease, it's not very common, but sometimes there is a clause in leases called force majeure, which deals with these sorts of situations, act of God sorts of situations, that provides a written plan of what occurs or what would take place in that event, that provides for payment deferrals, rent deferrals, extensions, things of that nature. You may want to check your lease to see that. What you want to do, however, is put this information in writing because you'll want that for your records down the road. That's about all I have on the landlord side. Other stakeholders are your clients and vendors, of course. Weigh your options. I've included both in this slide because I think it's important. You know, it's kind of flip sides of the same coin. You want to, again, contact your clients and vendors if you're cash strapped, which you are if you're closed, and maybe if your revenues are down significantly. If you have accounts receivable, I would be calling my clients to see if you can get them to pay early by offering discounts, or at least getting their information relative to their ability to pay timely. you'll want that information when you go to your own lender and give them experience of what, give them information of what you're experiencing. Vendors, the same situation. If you are owing vendors under existing terms, you may, and aren't going to be able to honor those terms, you may want to request discounts or a payment plan, even if you can return product. That may be something you want to consider, because as you go to your lender, one of the situations that they're going to be concerned about is your efforts to reduce expenses and how you will manage going forward in a depressed situation. Another opportunity is to offer to go COD on future orders until the situation is resolved with what is owed presently. That's not atypical. It's a little more difficult, but that's something that if you are typically selling on terms, I would strongly consider instating that sort of condition on your products and services, because undoubtedly the people that you're doing business with, your clients, are experiencing the same sorts of pressures that you are. And even if they have been multi-year, decades-long clients, if they're honest with you, they may also be having or looking at having difficulty repaying. One thing that I threw out that somebody thought was kind of an interesting idea is whether or not you could negotiate some sort of in-kind payments, trading products and services at this time, partnering with other companies. I really didn't take that very far, but it's something to think about in a crisis situation. Typically, your lenders aren't approving of that kind of business activity because it doesn't tend to, it doesn't show up as movement of cash flows in companies. But still, something to think about if that works. If you have receivables, there are factoring companies where you can actually sell them for cash, and it's a type of lending or borrowing on your part that may be slightly more expensive than traditional accounts receivable financing. But again, if you're looking to accumulate cash for operations, that's something that you might want to consider. Factoring is available online. All you have to do is type in factoring accounts receivable. There are a number of companies that are reputable and still in active business. Last thing is, there are decisions that will have to be made as to whether or not you're going to take legal action. You may do so even in conjunction or agreement with your client that, hey, I need to do this just to have it there for future. And it's the same with your vendors. They may want to have something, a confession of judgment or something of that nature, given the fact that there's so much uncertainty in the economy right now and in the business environment. If it's a cooperative sort of effort, it may do you well to consider that. Next slide, please. We're getting towards the end here. I'm running out of time. I know, I'm sorry, not a singer droning on and on. I hope that you're still awake. These are information sources that I think are really important and available to you. There is so much information available, it can be a little overwhelming, but all of these I've looked at outside of a CPA, and I've talked to CPAs. They all have relevant information about PPP program, the injury disaster program, and other information about the crisis in general. It's easy to get to that. I'm sure that you've seen all that you would ever care to relative to this crisis. But as a business owner, you're just going to have to stay informed. SBA.gov had good information. SCORE actually would be able to provide ongoing assistance to you. Chamber websites are really quite good too. And state of Arizona, I'm sure California and you folks on the coast also have very dynamic state websites. Governor Ducey has been adamant about keeping us informed, and it's excellent, the information that's there. So I'd encourage you to go there if you have any questions at all, or email your banker. You know, that's somebody that can do the research for you. And these are very busy times, but they want to help. It's in their best interest to help you. With that, next slide. I think we're ready for question and answers. And again, open to anything we'd like to discuss at this point.
Yes, so if anybody has any questions, please just type them in the chat option or the Q&A and we can answer those. We did have a question from Sherry. She wanted to know if she needed to file her 2019 taxes before applying for any of these loans.
From what I understand, no, that's not necessary at this point. You can utilize the information that's available and you'll be just fine, Sherry.
Okay, and then we have a question from Jake. You talked a little bit about Wells Fargo and how they have already maxed their applications for the loans. Is this number set by the government or is it set by the bank?
Wells Fargo, you may have heard, has had some difficulty over the past couple of years, and there were government regulations that were imposed on Wells as a result of that, kind of in terms of a penalty sort of situation. So no, it's just that to meet the terms of their agreement with the government at this point, that's all that they can take. That's not a typical situation. None of the other banks have limits unless they set them internally on how much of this lending activity they're going to participate in.
So we have a question from Eric. It's a lender communication. We are a real estate developer with the commercial site development loan for $2 million and about $1 million into the construction, planning to put the project on hold. What are some possible options with regards to the loan? Modifications, deferrals, forbearance, given that the loan is 24 months and the loan started in February 1st, 2020.
At this point, I think communication with your lender is very important. All of the options remain on the table for you in that regard. If it makes sense to put a hold on the project, I have never heard of across the board banks, credit unions, financial institutions being willing to provide the sorts of relief that their borrowers are requesting and needing, because there's a totality of understanding that this is just an unprecedented situation, and that our collective survival, if you will, depends on helping each other. So I think that if you put together a plan, that you will find that your bank or your credit union, your lender is willing to work with you. That would be my best advice. Get to them soon.
All right, thank you, Jeff. And then we have a question. You stated that the EIDL cannot be used for reasons PPP is being used and mortgage interest, payroll, and utilities were specifically mentioned. Does this include rent as well?
I believe it does. And again, to confirm this really is, things are changing so quickly. I'd recommend that the SBA website for that loan is really the EIDL. is really very comprehensive. So I don't want to try and pull it up on my computer while I'm talking to you because I'll probably lose you all. But I believe that you will be able to, you just can't have distinct same purpose borrowing is what my understanding is.
We have a question from Annette. As a solopreneur, would I be able to apply the PPP loan to cover my salary?
Yes, Annette, you sure would. I believe that applications for sole proprietors and contract employees, also any 1099 employee can, or independent contractor can apply for this loan as well. It's my understanding that your ability to do that begins on Friday of this week, a week after the initial program has begun. But yeah, absolutely, sole proprietors and independent contractors, for instance, hairstylists, beauty stylists, often are contracting space in salons. Those folks can apply as well. The shop owner cannot, but the independent contractor, the operator herself or himself, can apply for help.
Looks like we have a question from Mark. Since the banks are so busy right now and they're flooded with emails and phone calls, how soon should I apply for these loans if they're applicable to me? Should I wait a little bit or should I apply immediately?
I would definitely express interest with your existing credit union or bank. Get your name there. We are taking numbers and emails of interested parties that are accessing our website and keeping them handy so that when we are actually ready to go with our application process, likely in the next couple of days, we'll be able to start utilizing that information to get back to folks. Yeah, if you haven't compiled the information, put that together first and get to your lending institution and get yourself in line, or go to an agent. Somebody, and it's not a recommendation, but it just happens to be the one that I'm familiar with that is in process and doing them, is Lendio. They're acting as an agent for this program. And I know that they're processing applications now and verifying pursuant to what I said earlier about agents and the services that they're providing at no cost to applicants.
Great. So I think that's all the questions we have. If you have any more, please type them in the chat option or the Q&A. I want to thank Jeff for taking time out of his busy day to present this wonderful, useful information. It was a lot of information. Hope everyone felt that it's very valuable and definitely something that they can walk away with and hopefully implement. Let me do just a final quick swipe to see if any more questions. Looks like we don't have anything else, but once again, this recording will be made available for you on events.bbcommunity.org. If you have follow-up questions, you can definitely email me as well. Thank you everyone for attending. Thank you again, Jeff, for providing this information. Let me see, there's one question that just popped up. Oh, just a thank you to Jeff there from one of our attendees. So please stay safe out there and take care of yourself. Thank you.
Yes, everybody, thank you for your time and best wishes for good health and good spirits. Take care.